All right. Welcome to our final session of the day. This will be where we will take your enforcement questions live and then have some closing remarks. We did receive some questions already, so we'll get started with those. And we have Michael Delabout, Trent Wilson, and David Vitkus with us to help answer those questions. So first off, the question I wanted to ask first is, when you are evaluating compliance history, how far back are you looking with regards to standard versions?
I can take that one. I think for this one, we may want to have Dulce provide a response to the compliance history. We do go back several years, but there are some other caveats and different aggravating factors that we look at for prior history. So maybe if Dulce could provide a response in Whova.
We will definitely refer that to her. Michael, anything to add to that?
No, nothing to add to that for me. We'll respond in Whova.
Okay. How quickly after audit does WEC enforcement begin their analysis of the PNC and identified during an audit?
Yes, I can take that one. It really depends on what the triage process uncovers. We do start the triage process very soon after the audit ends and the PNC is entered into the system. If the risk is serious, we want to begin to process that one sooner rather than later. And we're trying to ensure that any PNCs submitted in 2023 that look like they will be minimal risk CEs or compliance exceptions, that we process those quickly and not hold up the process. So it really depends on what we determine in the triage.
Thank you. All right. Can you expand on how the process would be different for an entity that is participating in self-logging?
Yes, I can start with that one. For an entity in the self-log program, that process is similar to the Orco entity, the entity that had great detective controls and a strong compliance program. Self-logs and CEs with any type of discovery method, so self-report, audit findings, self-cert, those are processed very similar. There are PNCs that are discovered and remediated quickly. Both self-logs and CEs require the same amount of review and rigor for the enforcement team. Self-logs and other CEs may require a question or RFI to the entity, or may not require any questions or RFIs to the entity, and they're both processed as compliance exceptions. So in this case, if Orco was in the self-log program, they could self-log that SIP 13 PNC. If moderate risk, a self-log cannot be submitted. Self-logs are only for minimal risk PNCs, processed as compliance exceptions. A self-report would need to be submitted for any moderate or serious risk.
Yeah, all I would add to that, Maylee, is that these self-log items typically in historical performance have been processed much faster. Because we are able to know, and because of the training and the rigor that goes into the logs that have come from our entities, we typically have all the information that we need when those come in, and we're able to work much faster on those. So that's really what the distinction is.
Thank you. Is there written guidance on enforcement beyond the slides for this presentation?
We have some information in the NERC rules of procedure. We have some information in the NERC self-report and mitigation user guide, and then also in the Aligned self-report and mitigation user guide.
Great. I think we can also add those links into the Whova application at a later point. How long do violations stay on an entity's record to be counted against the entity as a penalty aggravator for future violations of same or similar requirements?
I think this is very similar to the previous question. It would depend on the circumstances of the former violations, how they were closed out, and the seriousness of the previous risk, but most certainly whether they were related in the root cause to the current violation.
Thank you. What is WEC's anticipated timeline for processing low-risk self-reports?
The anticipated timeline. Well, right now we're probably on low risk self-reports. We are probably about a year out on getting those processed, depending on what the condition of them when they come in. As I mentioned earlier, self-reports that are have everything that we need in them and have the full detail that our engineers can work through quickly will probably be able to be processed. As Trent mentioned, they go through the triage phase. And if at the triage phase, we determine that everything is there for it to move forward, it could be a candidate to move forward. Our primary goal for WEC at this time is to process violations that are 2 years and old or older and get those current so that we're working with the current group of non-compliances.
Thank you. What are some examples of non-monetary sanctions?
A non-monetary sanction, we have not had many in the West, but from other regions, I'll give an example because they're not an impossibility here. An improvement to the system that goes above and beyond the requirements of the standards for the sake of reliability. Those might be considered for non-monetary sanctions or the requirement to talk to a neighbor or something like that. It could be a range of items that would come in.
Thank you. This question is related to Align and also the process that you described in your presentation. In the enforcement module of Align, there is a flow chart at the bottom of the page. Where does the triage process take place in this flow chart?
The triage process, it takes place in the PNC review. So that would be under the PNC processing section and then PNC review.
Thank you. Okay. I actually think that took us to the, oh, I spoke too soon. A question came in. Is the move to Align SEL expected to speed up resolution of present and future audit findings?
I don't think that's the objective. I think the objective of using the SEL is improved security, not an improved transactions. In fact, I think oftentimes when we improve security, it does temporarily at least, or slow down the speed of the transactions where it has that possibility. So yeah, I don't know that it'll improve that, but certainly changes we make and improvements we're making to work and communicate with the audit team should lead to improvement of that from the enforcement side.
Okay. That was our final question at this time. Thank you so much for joining us to answer those questions live for our attendees. We'll now take the time to pass the mic to Steve Noss for his closing remarks.
Great, thanks, Mary. We can go ahead to the next slide too. Just have this up. First, though, I want to thank the team, and if you all have opportunity that are listening today in your interactions with our staff, they put a lot of thought, time, and effort into the presentations that they presented today, and I know they were really committed to trying to share the passion they have and help everybody gain a better insight into the notion that what we know about the entity and the investment of time and culture that the entity makes in the programs influences the engagement throughout the process. Includes the information we know, it includes the history, how they build their communication, their detection, all of those things matter. And so I hope that you all got a better insight into all that. We heard from Jessica and Daniel on the differences in process using Align and the SEL versus the older traditional processes. Thanks to Scott and Patrick for highlighting how the performance considerations for Oracle Electric and SunBear help to inform how we find concerns and help shape the review during our monitoring engagements. Phil covered the audit approach to cold weather preparedness and how that might vary between two entities, and how a robust program versus minimally compliant can certainly impact the experiences that you have with our team in monitoring. Thanks to Tom Morgan, Stacia, and Terry on supply chain for reviewing how program maturity can differentiate the audit approach. And Michael Dalebout, Dulce, Michael Shaw, David, and Trent took us through the enforcement factors that we use to review potential noncompliance and how that informs the risk determinations and outcomes and enforcement and mitigation process. So thanks for all of that. I hope you heard that there's benefit that we all gain collectively when we invest in improving our processes, programs, and compliance cultures, and that relates in differences in the activities under our CMEP, both for us and for the enemies, or for both for us and for the entities, excuse me, which ultimately serves our joint reliability and security mission, and we certainly hope that came across very clearly today, and certainly hope it generates some questions and discussions, and we certainly want your feedback too. So, as you think through what you've heard today and consider whether you work in a place that's more like Orco compared to a place that's more like Sun Bear, I hope this prompts some thoughts around steps you might start to take and take ownership of how you want your experience with WEC to be. So thanks again to everybody for participating, and thanks especially to our presenters. If we go to the next slide, I just want to leave everybody with save the date. We'll be in person again, like we were last October down in Arizona. This time we'll be in San Diego in October, and look forward to as many of you as possible that can attend this. I know we had 700 and some entities today, or individuals rather, that registered for this, and unfortunately the space is more limited than that. We won't have room for 700 folks in San Diego, but we want to put the save the date out there now and watch for the registration announcement when that opens, and we'll be there. Hope to see as many of you there as possible. So with that, I think closing the day, and appreciate the time and investment that everybody made in sharing these discussions with us.
Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you again to all of our presenters. If you'll go to the next slide, we have a workshop survey. We'd love to know what you thought of the sessions today. So please take a moment to use the QR code on the screen to respond to that for us. Also, be sure to check out the WCIF meetings tomorrow. They begin at 9 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Thank you so much for spending your day with us. We hope you have an excellent evening.